Hi, this is Bobby from Horse Tender Studio. First of all, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year. I hope 2019 is a great and prosperous year for all of you. Since we are into January now, that means it's NaMoPyMo season. National Model Painting Month starts February 1st and runs till February 28th. You can find out information about it on the NaMoPyMo Facebook page, which I'll put a link to down in the description. Sign-ups have already begun. They started on January 1st, and I thought that it would be really fun to try and make some tutorial videos just to talk about my process. There's a lot of different ways to do things. I'm certainly not saying the way I do it is the right way, but it works for me, and maybe it'll work for you, or you can, pick and choose. Something might work better than how you've done it, or whatever. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of try and do a brief video about how I prep models. And I'm going to be working with stablemates because that's actually mostly the scale that I work in, and they're small, they're cheap. I have hundreds of them. So they're really beginner friendly. You can pick one up at Walmart or many other places for like $4 and off you go. So the first thing you want to do is choose your model, and so I'm just using one of these girls for an example. This one's completely OF. This is one that I got from the mystery blind bags for 2018, and she's pretty nice. So I've got her. She was kind of spared from the body box, but so this is just a completely original finish OF stablemate. I guess I should talk about what kind of supplies that you'll want. The first step that I do is to remove the mold mark on their belly, the raised mark that says copyright Breyer Reeves. And so this one has had that done. And it's super easy. All I do is use an emery board or a nail file. This one is super old. I've had it forever, but it still works. It's just the right amount of grit to take off that mold mark and not really dig into the plastic. So I really like it for that. And so you just, sand on the belly until it feels smooth, and you get rid of that raised mold mark. Come on, camera. So you'll want a nail file, emery board. This one's actually broken in half, but whatever. For working on the seams, what I use is a carbide scraper from Rio Rondo. This is the handle and one of the tips. My favorite go-to tip just for general seam work is number 6. It's the tapered tip, I think. Long tapered tip or something. The carbide scrapers from Rio Rondo, the entire set of them I believe is $75 now. For that you get the handle, and you get the 6 different tips and a little case to put them in. The tips are in this box here. This is an older set, so I don't know if they look exactly like this now, but they are really worth it. I mean, they are worth every penny. I've had them for a long time and used them on all kinds of models, and they work really great. If you don't want to buy the whole set, you can just buy a handle and one tip for, I think, maybe $20, $15-20 altogether, but they're really nice. An alternative is actually just using an X-Acto knife, but you'll want to use one that's dull, because if you use a sharp, fresh blade, it'll bite into the plastic and kind of make more of a mess. And then alternative, if you don't have any of that, is just sandpaper. You can just sand the seams with regular sandpaper. I would use a finer grit. I've got kind of a selection of sandpapers here. 240 is probably the roughest I would use. And that's really if you had some plastic to remove, because it'll scratch up the surface. 400 That's a pretty good one for general smoother sanding. And then I've got 600 and 1000 grit, which is all the way to like the really fine finish work if you want them to just be super smooth. So anyway, the very first thing I would do, sorry this is a little unorganized, is to sand that mold mark on the belly using your nail file. And then once that's done, you'd check out where the seams are. So your seams are going to be down the front and back of each leg. You'll have them going up the chest here, up the neck, under the head, around the chin, up over the ears, down the middle of the mane, down the back, and then top of the tail, bottom of the tail, and then it'll split off into the legs again. And then up the front of the legs and up the belly. That's pretty much where your seams are going to be. So what I do is I use my carbide scraper, or like I said, you can use an X-Acto knife, and I'll find a seam, say on the front of the leg there, and just scrape. And you don't want to push hard. If you push hard, you'll actually start carving out the plastic. You just want to scrape really lightly. And if you notice, I kind of roll the model around while I'm doing it. That means that you won't get a flat spot, because you can actually get into the situation where, you know, you remove the seam, but then you've got this big flat area, and that's not going to look right either. So you just want to lightly scrape, and like I said, you can do this with a dull X-Acto as well. And you're just looking for the middle seam to go away. And like I said, you're not even pushing hard at all. I'm barely applying any pressure, and the scraper really does all the work. And I like to keep the model moving so that I'm not removing too much plastic in any one place. And you can kind of check by rolling your finger over, see if you feel that sharp seam anymore. That feels pretty good. So you would just keep going all the way around. For the hooves, what I like to do is kind of go sideways on them. I don't know if you can see that. So I'll put my tip on there and just kind of scrape sideways to take that seam off the front. And again, just kind of roll it back and forth. To get the hoof scraped off. And so now you've got the front of the hoof pretty well cleared up. So you'll just go around, under here you'll scrape, under here you'll scrape, oops, sorry, and just work it back and forth. Now the only other place to talk about for sure is the mane and tail. You want to remove the seam on the top of the mane, but you don't want to take away the mane detail, because if you were to just scrape the seam, then you'd have a flat spot on the mane. So what I like to do, one of the reasons I like the tapered tip on the scraper, is I like to get in there and actually just kind of pick at the seam. And then what you're doing is you're removing that obvious seam, but you're still leaving some, you know, carving line marks in the mane. So it could look more like hair texture versus just a flat place where you removed the seam. Turn it over, get at the other side. Kind of want to go in the direction of the hair And just take little bites out of the seam. And you could do this with the tip of your X-Acto knife too, if you're using that. With sandpaper, it's a little harder. I think what I would probably do is maybe fold your piece of sandpaper in half and then use like the pointy part of the fold to kind of get in there and pick at it. On the tail, I don't know if you can see, there's like this big weird flat spot a lot of them have. What I like to do with that is, again, I use the tip of the scraper or the tip of your X-Acto, and you want to brace your fingers on the horse, and you just want to start drawing some lines. And you can scrape some hair texture into that big flat seam on the back of the tail. And you just go again with the direction of the hair flow. And just kind of try to break up that big flat area. I'll do it underneath too. A lot of times under the tail there's flat spots, and I might just get in there and carve some lines just to break up anything that's just flat and doesn't look like hair. So that's just a quick overview of that. This one here is one that I've already done all of the seam scraping. So you can see she's got the white lines all the way around the legs, up the chest and the neck, down the mane. I picked out the extra plastic on her tail. She's got the scraping, a little bit of hair texture detail added in. And so that's pretty much the first part of what I do. The next part will be sanding. I take little strips of sandpaper and kind of just go all over them. There's some places that I don't scrape, like down the back. You usually have just a tiny bit of a seam. I don't scrape that because I really don't want to take out too much plastic, so I'll use a really fine sandpaper and work that off instead. So you'll want to go around and sand, you know, do like a smooth sanding in some places. And then the next step after that would be primer. This is the one that I've been using here. It's the only one I've found over here. The important thing that you want for your primer is that it says sandable, because after you prime, you're going to see places that still need to be sanded or scraped. You might even see some places that have to be filled in. My goal is to not have to fill, because that just adds more steps to the whole thing. So I'm really careful when I'm sanding and scraping to try not to take off too much material. But if you do have to fill, you know, that's an option too. I'll probably try to cover that in the next video. This was going to be just kind of a quick overview and kind of the first start. One thing I did want to mention really quick is a question that a lot of people ask is, do they need to strip an OF model? The answer to that is no. However, there are some exceptions. One exception is a horse with Appaloosa spots. So this guy has the Appaloosa spots painted on, and if you kind of scrape your nail across them, you can feel that they're raised. Now, if you were to just paint or primer over this, you might still see those raised dots. And so what I do is, again, I use my scraper and I just remove the spots so that they're not going to be raised up. Another example would be on like a pinto marking, like this guy. Again, if you take your fingernail and you kind of go across this border between the brown and white, you can feel that there's a raised edge there. Now some primers have a little bit of filling, and so they might just fill that in. But what I'll do is I'll take the fine sandpaper and just kind of smooth out the edges of those markings so that there's no harsh lines. And those are the only examples I would say that I can think of right now for something you might want to do to an OF finish. I think that's about it for this video. I want to try to keep them a little short, so let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. I think in the next one I might continue on with the prepping, maybe talk a little bit more about priming, sanding, spot filling, those types of deals. So yeah, just let me know what you think, and if you like the video, be sure and like it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit subscribe and the bell icon to get notifications. I'm going to be posting a lot more videos this year, including some more tutorials. So once again, thanks for watching. Happy New Year. Hope you guys have a good one. Love you guys. Bye.